We've got two great people on the show today. One of them is our presenter of today. His name is Richard Spaans. And Richard is the head of corporate and public affairs of Huawei in the Netherlands. You pronounce it correctly in a minute, Richard. I can't do it. And reflector is John Lin, strategic advisor of Board Consultancy, a board member of the Netherlands-China Business Charter, and a great provoker of, let's say, trying to get the two countries, so China and Netherlands, to work together and to at least get creative work all over the place. He's also a board member of the China Business Council, strategy consultant, and he was the former leader of business development at Bol.com, and also a regular columnist of two magazines called Twinkle Magazine and The Ondernemer. So trying to get East and West to join together. We're first going to listen to Richard Spaans with his presentation, and after that, John is going to reflect upon that. And after that, you will be able to ask your question. Richard, may I ask you to take the lead? You're on mute. There you are.
Good morning to you all. Thank you for joining this from a pretty cold office here in the Netherlands. Thank you, Tuan, for your introduction. I would like to take the coming 15 minutes to talk a bit about how geopolitics and technological developments are intertwined nowadays. So let me first share my screen. Can I share my screen, Tuan?
No, you're not. No, not yet.
Yeah.
It's the green button on the bottom of your screen.
Yes, now I can. Yes.
Yes, there you are.
So this. So let me start by you all know us. I assume from our smartphone business. I want to start in a couple of years ago in 2018. I think it was. We were competing across the globe with all kinds of different enterprises, but I think in around that time we a new competitor came on the surface, and that was the United States. I think the U.S. government, quite a fierce competitor, and I want to show you this slide to give a little bit more background why they popped up as a competitor to us. So you all know us probably from our consumer products, our smartphones, but some of you might also know that we are pretty strong in 5G equipment. So in the middle, you can see here that with regard to 5G, we are a market leader with our equipment for the telecom operators. Of course, China is a huge market. They have a very well developed 5G market, so that represents quite some revenue for us. Europe is still a very big market for us as well, although we face some restrictions in certain European countries. But for example, also a continent like Africa is, especially in the last couple of years, doing very well. We have supported quite some African countries in developing and building their telecom networks and improving their connectivity. So, but apart from that, I also want you to have a look at the left side, where it is about the patents, the patents for 5G. That's important because the patents define the global standards. So all players in the 5G markets, they jointly work together in a standardization body called 3GPP. And in that standardization body, they define the global standard for 5G. And all those players try to get their patents in that standard. Patents which do not make it to the standards, they are pretty much useless. Other patents become a so-called standard, standards essential patent, and that means they are in the standards, and then all players in the market have to use that patent, and that then represents quite a big revenue stream for the owner of those patents. And as you can see, we are also leader in that area. So apart from 5G, where we already have a strong position, on the right side, you can see that we are a player in all kinds of other technology domains. So of course, we have a lot of competition in China, of course, also by US companies. But the thing is that we are active in really a lot of different technology domains. And this all sums up to the fact that we can be seen as quite a threat or a risk to certain, to even certain countries in that respect. So I want to zoom a little bit deeper into 5G. 5G is an essential technology in the current fourth industrial revolution where we are currently in. It's until now it didn't had a lot of breakthroughs yet, but for the coming years we will definitely need 5G for all kinds of different developments like remote surgeries, autonomous driving, all kinds of AI applications. We cannot do that without 5G, and in a later stage 6G. So now I want to talk a bit about 5G and the different kind of players in that. We are a 5G equipment manufacturer, and we deliver that equipment to the telecom operators. But apart from us and the operators, also chipset vendors play an important role because we need chips to make our 5G equipment. So what we see here is that we and ZTE are Chinese 5G equipment players, and there are three other big ones, and that is Samsung from South Korea, and there are Ericsson and Nokia coming from Europe. So what is quite remarkable is that there are no 5G equipment players coming from the US. And for such a big and innovative country, that is, of course, quite disappointing. They are not happy with that. So now I want to zoom in a little bit on the three power blocks. In the US, you see that the telecom operators do not work with Chinese vendors. We are not allowed in that in that country. While in China, you see that only Samsung is not allowed. That can also be seen as a political decision because of the tensions between China and South Korea. And in Europe, you can see that more or less all vendors are allowed. But a couple of years ago, the European Commission introduced the so-called 5G toolbox. And that is a kind of toolkit. It's not mandatory, but member states can use that and impose restrictions to certain vendors based on security arguments. So in some countries, we face restrictions like in Belgium, in Sweden, in the UK. And for example, here in the Netherlands, we are also not allowed in a part of the network, only the core of the network. Apart from that, I want to have a quick look at the chipset vendors. Contrary to 5G equipment, the US is very strong in chipsets. they have Intel and they have Qualcomm. But the last couple of years, also in Asia, they go pretty fast. So Huawei and Samsung have been able to make their own chipsets as well. And then that has been used by the US. They have used their power in chipsets at some point in the trade war with China. So what they did was at some point impose restrictions on Huawei, on Chinese companies. And they said that they couldn't make use of US components anymore when they produced their own chipsets. For 5G, that wasn't a very big issue for our 5G equipment, because we had a lot of stock and we were at a point where we could almost produce our own chips for that 5G equipment. But for example, our consumer business has been hit very hard. For smartphones, you need other chips, much smaller and thinner ones, more advanced chips, and we were not able to produce those ourselves. So in 2021, our revenue dropped from 130 billion to 100 billion. So these measures have had a serious impact. Finally, what I want to mention is that recently also the manufacturers of machines to produce chips are an important player. So in the Netherlands, we have ASML and ASMI, which are pretty big in this area. And Japan has Canon. And the US also imposed restrictions there. So they have put export control on machines from ASML, who are not allowed to sell their equipment, their machines anymore to China, at least the most advanced ones. Recently, they also already said that also the less advanced ones are not allowed to be sold to China anymore. So this has, of course, a lot of impact on Chinese players, but moreover for ASML itself, who miss an important market, cannot put that money in innovation anymore. So this hurts. So what you can see is that on the short term, this might benefit the US. On the longer term, this might result in the fact that China will only go faster in becoming more independent from the US. And an example of this is the launch of our newest smartphone a couple of weeks ago, the Mate 60. Much to the surprise of the US, we have been able to produce our own 5G chips now, together with a Chinese manufacturer, SMIC. And apart from those 5G chips, we see that for that smartphone model, we now make use of almost 50% of the components which come from China. And that is much, much more than a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, we still made use of a very global supply chain. So 70% of the materials, not only for our smartphones, but for almost all our equipment, came from outside of China. That was so in order to get the best features and the best quality for our customers, but also not to become too dependent on certain companies and from certain countries. So I think all players in the tech industry work like that, and that worked pretty smooth. But the American measures have led to the situation that we are more or less forced to buy more domestically in China. Unfortunately, against our will, but it's just how the situation is currently. So here on the left side, you can see that China already for a longer time knows that it has to become more independent. So they are working on that for quite a long time already, and they do that in a kind of joint venture model. So for key technologies and key sectors, it is perfectly okay that foreign companies work in China, but they have to do that in a joint venture together with a Chinese company. So also in 5G, you see that Ericsson and Nokia are pretty big in China. They deliver their stuff to the telecom operators in China. They have a lot of R&D. They produce almost all their 5G equipment in China, but they do that together with a Chinese company. Then on the right side, you see that the measures from the US with regard to semiconductors has created a kind of uncertainty for other countries as well. They have become awake. They have looked into their own strategies with regard to semiconductors. And China was already working on that. The US want to become the biggest in semiconductors, but also South Korea has come up with their own plan, their national plan, and wants to be leading. And now also Europe has their own Chip Act. So Europe wants to build from scratch their own semiconductor industry, which of course will cost a lot of money, a lot of resources. They need people for that. So if it's feasible, I'm not so sure about it, but at least this is the way of thinking nowadays. And also here in the Netherlands, the Dutch cabinet has released a letter with regard to digital open strategic autonomy. So in this letter, they indeed also mentioned that the Netherlands should be more independent, but at the same time, they see that dependencies exist and that they also will exist in the future. So instead of blocking countries, they also look at, well, how can we strengthen our own industry and what are areas where we can excel in, so we have more leverage to other power blocks. So in that sense, I understand the way towards digital autonomy, that Europe wants to be more independent from other power blocks. I'm of course European myself. I think we need to have a strong industry here as well to be able to compete with other power blocks, but we also have to be realistic. I think if we go too far, then we really go into a way of decoupling, and then we get different standards across the globe, and I'm not sure if that is the way we want to go. Especially here in Europe, we are lagging a bit. So it will not be good for innovation and economic growth, in my opinion. So it should not become too protectionistic in this sense. Autonomy, okay, but not become too defensive. So in that area, the way the Dutch government wants to go and look where we are good at and where we can excel in is a good way. But then that risk analysis needs to be done very well and very well executed. And a suggestion might be that Europe focuses on innovative applications. The US is traditionally very strong in platforms, software, and chipsets, while Asia is strong in platforms and hardware. So Europe might focus, and Europe has also shown that they are very strong in that on the application layer. So this is more or less all I had to share on this. Some things I have learned in the last couple of 11 years, and which I want to perhaps share and share with you, is two short things. One is that it's very important to be prepared for unexpected events. We have been surprised pretty much. We saw some developments, but still we were hit very hard by certain sanctions and some measures from other countries. So I think for your business, it's always good to make a very good risk analysis and to see what kind of events could happen and how you can prepare for that. So yeah, prepare for unexpected events. And a second thing is related to culture. I work now in this company for 11 years, and it is I see that it makes a very big difference how you look at other cultures. If you see that they are different, then that can really create a situation in which you thrive. So you can see what you can learn from other cultures and how they do things and how that can complement your own way of working. But I see also colleagues here who see the different way of working as strange. And when you see it as strange, then usually it's becoming very hard to work in with people from a different culture. I think that's all what I wanted to share.
Beautiful, Richard. Thank you so much for this presentation and the beautiful insights. John, can you reflect upon this presentation?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks, Richard. Nice to hear the story and journey you guys are on and how you're battling all the preconceptions the world has. I think like you saw the map of the world a few times in Richard's slides, and it's interesting to see the world is actually de-globalizing by tech companies, because all kinds of countries try to protect their industries, and tech companies suffer under this. And Huawei is one of the examples, but the Dutch ASML will also suffer from the different new regulations there are there. And I think it's for the jobs like Richard, it's a very hard balance between politics and being the best in what you do. Because when you are too good, you're not awarded for it anymore. But you'll get sanctions, other countries will block you. So that's a very difficult role, where it used to be when your technology is the best, when your service is the best, your business will win. But not anymore when politics will get into this picture. And Huawei is unfortunately an example of that, because they have done their homework really well. They have the most patents. They were 5 years ahead of the curve. They just started earlier in developing their tech. But the world is not awarding it. The US is actually afraid of it. And that's very weird. So politics is a weird stakeholder with, how do I say it nicely, limited knowledge on tech. And you really need to see it as a stakeholder. You need to influence. And that's quite a hard job, because culture is in there, different values are in there. So that's a challenging environment. And the weird thing is, like, Huawei is the smartest kid in the room on network technology, but other players are saying they are cheating. But that's actually not very true. And when you really look under the water, like, okay, a country wants to protect its own market. I think in the US, the 5G market is about $430 billion the next 10 years. And they see, oh, we don't have any competitors of our own. So they will lose that market. And so it's actually about the money, about the jobs they lose. And I think the way the Chinese government did it with opening joint ventures, it's all about control and making sure you can still work together with other companies, other countries, while protecting your own market. I think that's a very strong model that we maybe need to open ourselves up in the West as well, to see, hey, the Chinese did it this way. Maybe we should also do it this way when we are not the leader in some tech front. So still, in the end, be flexible and also be aware of different preconceptions, and have an open mind to different cultures and their tech and their companies.
Right. Beautiful, John. Beautiful, Richard. People, it's now time to ask questions if you have any. You can do that by raising your hand using the symbol reaction button on the bottom of your screen, or you can type in your questions in the chat room. I will go through the screen and see if I can moderate in between your questions and the presenters. Let me see, there's a picture being shared by Ellen Is that something that's worth to discuss, Ellen?
Not really. I just realized that the world is having conversations around the same topic, and people can drill down on that particular article just to have more information. Otherwise, it was a great presentation, very informative.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other people having any questions to either Richard or John, or remarks in general? Okay. Let me ask you one. So it's noticeable that at least on the technology part, there seem to be empires in different countries, forcing those countries to work together. But we also see a movement that John talked about, that those, let's say, those powers are being spread all over the world. And that's something, Richard, you called to be a bad thing. Can you tell us a bit about that one?
Well, a bad thing. I think it's not a bad thing. So I think absolutely, like I also mentioned, I think it's a good thing that you are, in Europe we always talk about it, in the Netherlands, not be too naive. So of course you need to have your own industry, especially you need to be good in certain key areas where you don't want to be too dependent on others. I think we have seen it during Corona, where we were very dependent on medicines from India and China. We have seen it in the war between Ukraine and Russia with the dependency on Russian gas. So I think people, got awake, and they definitely saw that in some areas, we need to have our own things, and we need to have our own players who can deliver things. So that is one side of the story that should be there. At the same time, I think we still need cooperation across the globe, and it should not go too far in the way that you are really going to make too many restrictions, and that it's more or less is going to protectionism. So I think you need to find the kind of balance in there, but still I think we need each other. I think, if you can keep those global supply chains in some area, those global supply chains exist, and it's impossible to do without them. So we need to keep those. I think it's good for innovation and for economic growth. Yeah.
Anything for you, John, to add to this?
Yeah, totally agree with Richard. The interesting thing is when you centralize things tend to get more efficient. A cool example is the Netherlands. They are the most efficient in agriculture, but we want to move it away from the Netherlands, so let other countries do some of their own agriculture. But if you look at it in a total, there will be more CO2, there will be more like inefficiencies in the chain when you just let it all be in the Netherlands, because the Dutch are so good in it. And the same applies for all different kinds of tech. But then, find better ways to work together and rely on each other.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any more questions? People, just raise your hand, put them in the chat box. I've got a question from Shamu Norwa. Could you please tell us what you are saying? Shamu Norwa.
Hi. So my question is, as African businesses, where should our focus be on? Be it, look, in the short term, the medium term, and the long term, how can we best leverage on the work that you guys have already done, as be it a Huawei or the other European tech companies? Because I think, besides the fact that you guys already know the landscape, we probably know way less than you guys know in terms of the direction we should go. So my question is, where should we be focusing on? Short term, medium term, and long term?
Did you get the question, Richard?
Yes, to some extent, it's a good question. It's not an easy question for me to answer, I have to say. Need to do some thinking. John, do you already have perhaps something?
Yeah, maybe I can put a parallel with China, because like I think 25 years ago, 98% of the population was below the poverty line. I think it's $2 a day. And within 25 years, it's almost 0%. So poverty is gone within one generation. And the way China did this, they knew, okay, if we let Coca-Cola or Shell or Philip Morris into a country, they will destroy it. Capitalism will pull all the money away from this country. So that's why they put up their joint venture structures. Like you need to develop some intelligence on your own. So with the car companies, they did that. So every car company has a joint venture in China. With the networking companies, they did that. So they found out a way to, on the short term, learn a lot from the different countries in the joint ventures. On the medium term, to develop their own products, but they were way worse in the beginning. So that's where the bad Chinese reputation comes from, with the copycat products. In the long term, they had like a made in China, or designed and created in China vision. And that's where they're going now. So China is building their own cars, their own tech companies, their own social media platforms, which are way better. So short term it's actually stealing the knowledge with the joint ventures. Medium terms, what they did was trying to copy the tech and learn how they do it. And the long term is, okay, do it on our own. And that's how they did it. I think it's the core, the fundamentals of, okay, we should have some own capabilities. That's an important part. And not trusting the Western companies. That's actually what they also had underneath it.
Okay. Thank you so much. That, I think, answers the question. I've got another question from Edem. Edem, you. I will share the question because Adam is on mute. He's stating, it's evident that Africa is not represented in producing advanced technologies. In your experience, where does Africa hold strengths and what should Africa focus on? John?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think the main strength, like what China is facing, is population aging. That's a weakness in the next 20 years, and population aging is one big topic for the whole West. I think Africa doesn't have that problem. Still doesn't have that issue. So on the short medium term, it's human capital, and the resource in that. Yeah, you shouldn't call it resource, but you know what I mean. And mobilizing that and putting that, creating a strength out of that. I think that's using that potential that's there.
Beautiful. Richard, anything to add, or you agree?
No, I don't have anything to add to this.
Okay. We come closer to the end of this session, so I will look around if people have any more questions. Otherwise, I'm going to close today's Zoominar. There's still people joining in, but I don't expect questions from them. There's a question from Edem again. What's the main risk of not participating in producing advanced tech as a continent? Do strengths outweigh the risk? I didn't pronounce it right, but did you understand what I was trying to read?
What you will get is Europe, but on digital tech. So Europe is currently using all kinds of American tech and Chinese tech, especially on the digital medium. So we use American social media. We have there are not many big consumer tech companies in the US and Europe. So they only rely on the US and China for TikTok and some kind of consumer electronics. So Europe doesn't have, this only has fundamental tech. And the problem is the European Union can only regulate. They cannot do anything on their own. Oh, Apple is gatekeeping the type of apps that go in the App Store. Okay, we give Apple a fine. Yeah, like Apple or Facebook cares about a $2 billion fine. Their profits are way larger than that. So they will just pay the fine. So Europe is, becoming kind of a museum because they don't have their own consumer tech companies, and it's pure, yeah, partly to blame for regulation. It's hard to create a big tech company in Europe, but they should do so. They're like, yeah, Google, you should open up the travel part of Google, yeah, or build your own Google. China has it. China has Baidu. So that's the problem of Europe. So yeah, you should participate in it. That's my opinion. I think there's no real answer.
Agreed.
Yeah, I fully agree with John on this. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That clarifies a lot. Thank you so much for your presentation and reflection, Richard Spaans and John Lin. It was an honor to have you on this morning's Good Morning BSN. Next week, we are going to talk about best practices, and then especially about best practices for founding new businesses. So we're going to listen to people that are going to share with us their experience in founding a company and how to make that successful. I hope to see you around next week, same time, same channel, same Zoominar. We will start again at 8:15 sharp and try to end this before 8:53, which is about a minute away, but I'm going to close down anyway. So thank you very much. Have a great working day. Hopefully you can use the knowledge shared by Richard and John, and hope to see you next week on our next Zoominar. Bye. We've got two great people on the show today. One of them is our presenter of today. His name is Richard Spaans. And Richard is the head of corporate and public affairs of Huawei in the Netherlands. You pronounce it correctly in a minute, Richard. I can't do it. And reflector is John Lin, strategic advisor of Work Consultancy, a board member of the Netherlands-China Business Charter, and a great provoker of, let's say, trying to get the two countries, so China and Netherlands, to work together and to at least get creative work all over the place. He's also a board member of the China Business Council, strategy consultant, and he was a former leader of business development at Bol.com, and also a regular columnist of two magazines called Twinkle Magazine and The Ondernemer. So trying to get East and West to join together. We're first going to listen to Richard Spaans with his presentation, and after that, John is going to reflect upon that. And after that, you will be able to ask your question. Richard, may I ask you to take the lead? You're on mute. There you are.
Good morning to you all. Thank you for joining this from a pretty cold office here in the Netherlands. Thank you, Twan, for your introduction.